Coming up on Nebraska Stories, a junior Olympian making extraordinary strides. The enduring artistry of William Henry Jackson. A fast-growing sport hits the bullseye. Plus, faith, dreams, and the kindness of strangers on a Nebraska highway.
I can make it to the Olympics one day, and that's a really big goal that I have now.
You hit that 10-yard.
You can't give up. Got to keep working, and it's something that it almost is like a sibling to me, because like you don't always like it, but you love it in the end.
We did not know that it would come to this, but we're grateful, and we don't take it for granted.
And at the rate she's accomplishing what she's accomplishing, there is no limit.
My dad saw me running when I was like in my walker when I was a baby. He said I wasn't just running, I was actually striding, which showed him that I had like the technique for a track runner.
She started running at 7. As far as officially in a track circuit, she started to really perform at a higher level than expected. It just caught us by surprise.
I made it to nationals my first year, so that's kind of when I realized that this is something that I'm actually good at and something that I can have a career in.
Seeing her talent, my whole thing was, I know I can help her, but it's going to take a village to raise Jaya. So I'm trying to bring the right people in to make sure that her gift goes as far as she wants.
A lot of people think running is just going out on the track and running, but there's a lot of small things that you have to work on, and it takes a while to master them, and even professionals have to work on this.
The little nuances of exercise, the nuances of her sprint mechanics, those are going to be things that the best of the best do very, very well. And so getting her to that level is kind of what we're all striving for, because the physical maturity will still come. She's very naturally talented, but I think what separates her from other people her age is her just desire to do the things she loves.
Ready.
I love track a lot, and I have a lot of fun doing it, but track is one of those things that it's also not always going to be fun. You can't give up.
She is carrying on a torch that, you know, we didn't see coming.
I know I've trained like all season for this, so now's the time where my hard work will pay off.
I knew she was going to do well, but I did not know she was going to do this well. She went out there and she dominated that race from start to finish.
In that moment, I'm very excited that she's won, but the way she responds to it and handles that is what matters even more than the fact that you have this title. And anything that she does, people are going to pay attention to, not just the fact that you're a winner, but how you win, you know, and what you represent overall.
My biggest goal overall is to break a world record in the 400, but right now I just want to keep focusing on getting better, getting my times down. I can make it, hopefully make it to the Olympics one day, and that's a really big goal that I have now.
Yeah, I don't see her getting off track. She's very focused on what she wants to accomplish and what she wants to do, and I think that we can expect to see more great things from Jaya.
William Henry Jackson was one of the most prolific American artists of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He personally witnessed and recorded the expansion of the American West in thousands of photographs and in hundreds of drawings and paintings. At the age of 23, the young Civil War veteran headed west. He landed in Nebraska City, where he was hired by a freighting outfit bound for the mines of Montana. Traveling the historic Oregon Trail, Jackson sketched landmarks and moments of everyday life along the trail that became iconic scenes of the West. In 1868, he opened at Jackson Brothers Photography Studio in Omaha and was commissioned by the Union Pacific to photograph the Transcontinental Railroad. He visited the Omaha, Pawnee, and Otoe reservations, recording rare images of tribal members. In 1870, Jackson's landscape photography caught the attention of Ferdinand Hayden, a geologist leading an expedition into Wyoming Territory. Jackson became the first photographer to successfully document the awe-inspiring wonders of Yellowstone. His images conveyed the breathtaking beauty and unique natural features of the wilderness, convincing Congress to preserve Yellowstone. It became the nation's first national park in 1872. During his extensive travels throughout the West, Jackson marked the profound changes that shaped our nation. He documented various groups of indigenous people in both artistic renderings and photographs, capturing not only their unique tribal cultures, but creating an important record of their existence during a pivotal chapter in American history. Today, the Oregon Trail Museum at Scottsbluff National Monument holds the largest collection of William Henry Jackson paintings in the world. Park visitors can immerse themselves in Jackson's vibrant tapestry of American Western history as seen through the eyes of an intrepid explorer and pioneer in American art and photography.
Axe throwing is quickly growing a reputation around the United States and rapidly becoming a popular pastime. Sometimes called hatchet, athletes compete by throwing an axe at a target, attempting to hit the bullseye as close as possible.
When I think of axe, I think of a big, like a long-handled axe like you would use for firefighting for forcing entry or anything like that. But it's actually more of like a hatchet. So the hatchets themselves are about anywhere from 1.25 pounds to about 5 pounds.
You have to be behind a 12-foot line, and then there's another 15-foot line. There's hatchet, big axe duels, knife throwing, stuff like that.
Modern competitive axe throwing began in the early 2000s, and it quickly grew into a sport that's accessible for nearly anyone. With the introduction of axe throwing bars across the country, more and more people have been introduced to the pastime while enjoying their favorite drink.
I would say for most people, it's two things that definitely shouldn't go together, but we find a way to make it work.
Jesse Rude is just one of the many who fell in love with the sport. After graduating from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and marrying his wife, Isabel, the two ventured out to Colorado in 2019 for a summer camp. While mentoring young children as a horse wrangler, Jesse found a new passion that exceeded his wildest dreams.
One day, I just picked up an axe and tried it, and I was like, this is pretty sweet. And one of the older guys at camp was like, yeah, and all you have to do to double your rotations of the axe is just back up the same distance you're from the target, so just double your distance.
With this new interest in tow, Jesse and his wife moved back to Nebraska to fulfill a childhood dream, one that would have slight parallels to his new passion.
My dad was a firefighter all throughout my life, various different departments, volunteer departments. So I knew early on I wanted to go into firefighting. I had my EMT, but I had no fire experience. So I kind of thought it would be a really difficult time. But with COVID, there was some openings at the Air Guard base, so I kind of slipped in at the perfect time. Obviously, for firefighting, you're using an axe for all kinds of things, forcing entry, helping with the Halligan, but that's what we use axes for on the job. It's a lot harder to throw those big axes. One night when we were closing, I threw probably like a 6 rotation shot. And I was like, dang, I kind of want to see what the world record is. So I went home, looked it up, and it was around 72 feet at the time. And just that night, 60 or so feet, I knew I was close. So I was like, with some practice, I guarantee you I could break it. So I applied for the record, and it took really a long time to get approved to attempt it, maybe 4 or 5 months. But in the meantime, Kraft put me into contact with the Nebraska Sports Council and Dave Mlarnick, who works out there. He's a great guy. And he was super excited about having me do it for the Cornhusker State Games.
In order to set a record, Jesse trained hard to hone his throw.
I would say I was going like 3 to 5 times a week, depending on how busy I was. But I'd go out there in the morning and just throw till the mid-afternoon and toss my headphones in.
With his sights set on the 72-foot record, Jesse's goal was not only to break the record, but to shatter it.
Obviously, some days if I wanted to focus more on like 120 feet or beyond, I wouldn't throw as many until I got to 120 just because my arm was gassed. And I also had issues initially where I think I overdid it.
I mean, we lent him old, like half-used boards that he could practice on. We gave him a couple sprayers, because if the wood's too hard, it's not gonna stick. Just kind of gave him like the supplies he needed and the support of like an official, like we're certified with the World Axe Throwing League.
We had to reach out to Allied Surveying and Mapping, and they were awesome, volunteered their time to come out and get it certified. I think most of the nerves came from like the questions I was getting on the day of, where people were saying like, what kind of percentage are you hitting from like 75 feet plus? And I was like, well, I've never thrown in front of people ever. And I was pretty nervous after about 8 or 9 that I invited all my friends and family to come watch me not stick an axe. But then I think I really relaxed, took a couple deep breaths. I finally stuck from 89.3 feet officially. It was pretty sweet when I hit it, and I think it was mostly because I missed so many, and I think I could kind of see that people were starting to question if this was like gonna happen. But I was really excited after sticking to get a chance to hit from 120, because in warm-ups even that day I hit 2 axes from 120, so that was my goal. And even though it was only by like 10 or so feet, it's just cool to have your name on something like that.
He comes from a small town, I come from a small town, different small towns, but still, like, for that world record to be held by someone who came from rural Nebraska, I think that part was like the coolest part for me.
I would love to do it again. It was kind of a lot of hoops initially to jump through, and I kind of just enjoying the time of not setting anything up.
As Jesse looks to the future and potentially defending his world record, the popularity of axe throwing continues to spread.
Some people do, like spa days, stuff like that. For a lot of people that come here, it's how they forget about a bad day at work or stress or whatever. It's just something to get your mind off of whatever you're going through.
I was running a filling station on I-80 in Shelton, Nebraska. And I looked up one day, and here was a Winnebago motorhome. It was just covered with scripture. Every inch of it had scripture on it. And I thought, oh, it's a band of hippies. And I was relieved to find out it was just one man, 49 years old, and he was headed west. He kept saying the starter kept trying to engage as he's coming up the interstate. He said, well, I got to find a junkyard. He thought he'd only be there a half hour, and I said, well, there's one at the next intersection.
My name is Leonard Knight, and I made this mountain 22 years here, and I'd love to give you a tour of it.
There's a man-made mountain in California called Salvation Mountain. The mountain is a sculpture, the vision of one man, built by one man, Leonard Knight. It's also a testament to his faith, his holy vision. Where the air is dry and the sun burns hot, Leonard Knight's Salvation Mountain is built in southeast California. The hillside visionary environment is built mostly of hay bale construction and covered with adobe clay. Knight used thousands of gallons of donated paint to coat his candy-colored mountain that took almost 30 years of his life to create. In 2002, Salvation Mountain was considered a unique national treasure. But before building a mountain in California, he tried the skies of Nebraska.
Dad and Leonard met. It was a morning. I'll never forget it. He came in on this little moped, long, skinny guy. He walked in back door of my dad's shop, and he said he needed some parts. That's how the friendship was born. Leonard didn't have any money, but Dad tried to help him out the best he could. He just stuck around. My name is Hal Jones. My dad was Copy Jones, and a friend of Leonard Knight. Dad got that nickname when he was about 5 years old. He lost his leg, and the nurses up there bought a get well gift. It was a police hat, and they just called him Copy from then on, and it just stuck. He was a self-taught mechanic, blacksmith, welder, you name it, Dad could do it.
Before Marie Guy passed in 2016, she shared her memories of Leonard in a phone interview.
Getting back to Leonard, he parked his little bus out back of my station. He was just really kind of a pleasant guy to have around. We had some very deep discussions. His goal in life was to get the Word of God out.
Hadn't thought about Leonard for several years, but his memories linger on. He had a dream to become a preacher, but the way he was going about it was a different way.
When you asked him what he did for a living, or you asked him what he was, and he said, I'm an evangelist. Leonard's vehicle he was driving was a piece of art. It was a Dodge mid-70s van with a raised roof, white background paint, red lettering that said, Jesus saves, God is love, the sinner's prayer written on the side of it. It was unique. It was something you wouldn't see. I mean, we didn't have internet or anything like that. You just didn't see stuff like that.
Then he got the idea one day that he bet if he had a big hot air balloon with scripture on it, that just maybe that would work.
Are you on now? This story starts back in 1970 in Burlington, Vermont, approximately 20 years ago. I saw a hot air balloon going over the main street, and kids were pulling their parents out of the stores, having them look at the balloon. And they were saying, Daddy, what does the balloon say? I just wished it said God was love on it. There could have been 2,000 or 3,000 people looking up, saying God is love.
And Dad bought into Leonard's story. Dad believed him. Dad wanted to see that dream of his come true, because you could see the fire in Leonard's eyes. And that was Leonard's purpose, was to tell God's story. As soon as you did something like that back then, you were crazy. You were deemed nuts. And Dad found a balloon factory in South Dakota. And that's the only way they were going to get this balloon made, was either buy enough yardage of fabric to make it themselves or buy the scraps. They loaded up my dad's pickup and shut down the shop for 4 or 5 days. And the way they went, come back with a pickup full boxes of pallets of nylon scraps from that balloon place. Once they got home, Leonard took the scraps, he starts laying them out, and he started sewing that thing together with a sewing machine. These scraps, and making the letters. And by the time they got done with it, it wasn't perfect, but it got the job done.
And I broke down in 1980 in Shelton, Nebraska. And I was going to stay 2 hours. And the people treated me nice, and I stayed 4 years and cut cottonwood and drove a corn truck and met hundreds of nice people in Nebraska. And they all kind of helped me build the balloon. And I sewed it with a sewing machine from scratch and had a lot of fun doing it.
And he would sew and sew and sew, and I don't know how many thousands of yards of thread he said he used, setting out behind my station. The newspaper in Kearney got a hold of his story, and they had it on the front page of their paper, and they likened it to a whale in a harlequin suit.
2 photographs showing the inflated balloon behind Max and Marie Guy's Interstate Service Station have been found, and several articles appeared in Nebraska newspapers. A video showing Leonard trying to inflate his balloon in the California Sonoran Desert was shot after he left Nebraska. Leonard never intended to take it for a ride. Instead, he wanted to raise it high into the air to spread the message that God is love, which he sewed in big letters on the balloon.
When you used scraps, you used everything you had. And he had a dream. He just kept going until he had all the scraps put together.
Dad was the first one that ever gave him the chance or the opportunity. And even then, the money to get the balloon, Dad made him do stuff around the shop. The car that I still have from when I was 16, Dad had him do the body work and paint that car to get the money to go get the scraps of balloon stuff.
He would work out back and he would wait on customers, and he was always pleasant. He was always happy. It was really a comfort to me to have someone else with me at that interstate interchange, because it got pretty scary at times.
I always said he was on a low budget. He didn't get too interested in really staying with anything, because he had this balloon and God on his mind, and he was going to fulfill it regardless.
Leonard would survive by generosity. He never begged. People would see a need and they'd pick it up. And he might have a few bucks in his pocket, but somebody would pick up his tab.
I was out here one year in 1979, and I liked the weather. And I always wanted to get back here when it snowed a lot in Nebraska. But people in Nebraska treated me awful good, too. Good memories. And I guess I got 1,000 good memories.
Leonard had spent several years in central Nebraska sewing his hot air balloon after he rolled into the interstate filling station in 1980. With very little notice, Leonard packed up his balloon and in the fall of 1984 headed west.
He just headed for California. He just came in and thanked us for all of our hospitality. Remember, Copy Jones was worried about him.
To put this vision from his head to fabric, from scraps to sewing machine, it took a lot of talent to do what he did.
Even artists have called him artistic, and he just laughed. He says, well, if you call making a lump of clay and running your fist into it and then painting it an artist, he says, I guess I'm an artist.
I feel very privileged that I can do this.
Leonard had a dream, like the rest of us. We've all had dreams of doing things and accomplishing things. And sometimes those dreams kind of go by the wayside. And I think maybe he gave up on the dream of balloons, and he went to California and done something bigger and better where more people could see it.
And I never did get the balloon up, although I tried hundreds of times in Nebraska, probably 40 times in South Dakota, and I never got the balloon up because I didn't have the right heat in the propane bottle. Out here I had the propane bottles and the people loving me, but it got too rotten, and it ripped easy. I'm glad about now, because if it didn't have rotten out, I might not have put this adobe hill up here. So this is why the hill is up here. It had the same message, and it seems like everybody loves me. And I'm excited about this mountain because I can have Catholics, Baptists, people who love God, people who don't, black and white, and they all seem to love me and give me a compliment. And I think love is like a snowball going downhill. If they treat me good, I want to treat them good. And in town, when I go in the restaurant, I want to check my mouth to make sure I'm as good as they are. And the better I try to be, the better they are. It's a beautiful thing. God, I wouldn't want to trade this place for any place in the whole world.
Leonard never sought attention, but with his many attempts to send his message into the skies and his 3-story tall and 100-foot-long mountain adorned with a cross, Leonard became a celebrity of sorts. He's been featured in numerous newspapers, magazines, videos, and films. Salvation Mountain is a destination and a pilgrimage for thousands each year. and is maintained by Salvation Mountain, a nonprofit organization, which continues to fight for preservation and ownership of the land.
Put the camera where you think it should show that God is loved real good.
With declining health, Leonard Knight entered a nursing home in 2012, never to work on his mountain again, only to visit on rare occasions. Leonard passed away February 10, 2014, at the age of 82.
If all the people in Nebraska can see this, and I just hope it really gets up and have a lot of fun making it. I appreciate everybody in Nebraska. God bless you all.
Watch more Nebraska Stories on our website, Facebook, and YouTube. Nebraska Stories is funded in part by the Margaret and Martha Thomas Foundation.